here, but welcome all to our Regional Industry Advisory on Agriculture, Business, and Entrepreneurship, covering fermentation sciences, brewing, and viticulture careers. We're excited to have you with us today, and we'll move to the next slide. Want to go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Caitlin Blockus, and I'm a project manager here at Valley Vision, and also wanted to let my colleague Liz introduce herself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Liz Kilkenny. I am the 21st Century Workforce Coordinator here at Valley Vision. Been doing a lot of work on the back end to get this off the ground and going, and I'm so excited to see all the formation and all the thoughts that are going to come out. Yeah, and I can hand it back to Caitlin.
Thanks all, and appreciate you all joining us. Part of the reason we host these advisories is to align our industry sectors with employer and education. So excited to have you here with us for the journey. And we'll go to the next slide here and just do a little bit of housekeeping here with you all on Zoom. If possible, we would love it if folks could enable their video cameras. We like seeing your lovely faces here. We also welcome you all to stay on mute unless you are called upon to ask a question. We'll have some time for Q&A later on where you're welcome to unmute. But until then, if you could keep that mute button on. We love your cats and dogs and your neighbor with a leaf blower, but not so much during the advisory event. So please stay on mute there until you're called upon. And then this meeting, as I'm sure you got the lovely Zoom notification when you joined, will be recorded and provided as part of post-meeting materials. The slide deck, the labor market data, all of the information from today will be sent out to you all. So keep an eye on that for the future, and you'll be receiving that for anyone who's hankering for that data later on. Next slide, please. Awesome. And before we get started, I want to walk us through our agenda here quickly. You're here with me for a little welcome and introduction here. We'll hear shortly from our keynote speakers before moving into our labor market data and trend analysis. We'll have our wonderful employer panel discussion, as well as some closing remarks, and we will get things concluded right at 3 o'clock today. Passionate about getting you folks out on time for a little afternoon snack, maybe a fermented one, who knows? But that's our agenda here today. And we'll move to the next slide. Before we get started, I really wanted to pause and say a thank you to all of our sponsors, including the Los Rios Community College District, who helps make this work happen, in addition to the California Community Colleges, the Centers of Excellence, and the Capital Region Workforce Development Boards. Wanted to say thank you all. Their funding is what allows these events and this regional collaboration to occur. So thank you. Next slide. I also wanted to say one more thank you to our planning team. Dr. Jessica Coppola is here today and will be speaking just shortly. She is the professor over nutrition, food science, and beer brewing at Sacramento City College. Part of our planning team also included Aaron Kangas, who's the Director of Employer Partnerships for Los Rios Community College District over retail, hospitality, tourism, agriculture, water, and environmental tech. They were instrumental in planning this advisory and helping with outreach and getting folks here today. So appreciate them very much for joining. Thanks to you too. And we'll kick it next over to Dr. Jessica Coppola. Dr. Jessica Coppola is a professor of nutrition, food science, and beer brewing at Sac City College, where she brings a unique blend of scientific expertise and hands-on beer brewing knowledge to the classroom. With a PhD in nutritional biochemistry from UC Davis, her research has explored how aging affects appetite and food intake. Recently trained in beer brewing, she now teaches Nutrition 336, Introduction to Beer and Brewing, blending science and craft to engage the next generation of fermentation professionals. Dr. Coppola is passionate about student success and thrives on making science relevant, practical, and fun. And we will kick it over to her now to give us a lovely 101 on fermentation for folks who are new to the subject. Jessica, I'll hand it over to you.
Can everybody hear me okay?
Perfect. Thank you.
Then I guess you guys are doing the slideshow, or am I?
Yes, we'll move to the next slide. There we go. Thank you.
So yeah, as Caitlin said, I was asked to just give a general overview of fermentation. I was kind of the instigator of this meeting. I'm really dabbling in lots of aspects of fermentation lately, fungal fermentation, the future of food type of stuff, and I just am seeing some commonalities, so I'm excited to hear from all of you. And they asked me to kind of give a basics of fermentation. We're all doing fermentation here, so this is nothing new to you, but it might help us to feel some cohesion with all the different types of fermentation going on in the industry. So here we go. To begin, fermentation has been done for thousands of years, right? It was originally a way to preserve food before refrigerators existed. And I like to think of examples like ancient, beer in Egypt, for example. And each culture of the world has come up with some staple foods that are fermented. But they've stuck around not only out of tradition, but also because they're very good for us. But fermentation is basically just a way that a cell can make energy from food. That's what it is. There's kind of two basic avenues for making energy. There's aerobic energy production, which means with oxygen, and anaerobic energy production, meaning without oxygen. And in the jar of kombucha, or the two jars that you see on the slide here, you can see the one on the left has a cloth on it, right? And that allows air to come in and out. And so that allows for aerobic energy production amongst the organisms living in that kombucha on my pantry shelf. The picture on the right is anaerobic energy production happening. You can see it's sealed in there. It has a little bubbler or airlock on the top that allows gases to come out, but it doesn't let any air in. And so therefore the organisms in that sweet tea are going to need to make energy anaerobically in order to survive. And so we're going to focus today on fermentation anaerobically. There's some other types, but we're going to focus on that one today. So this is what, will you go back to the cell? There we go, perfect. This is what fermentation looks like kind of in a cell, as like a little brief overview. You can see that the cell will start with something carbon-based, usually sugar, and it's going to ferment that sugar into other things and therefore generate ATP or energy for itself. And this process is pretty quick, so it doesn't have a lot of steps to it, and it can be done when there's no oxygen present, so the cell's able to convert that into its byproducts pretty quickly and make energy. On the next slide are a few images of fermented products you're probably already familiar with. So for example, Swiss cheese, all those little holes, those are the gases from the fermenting of that milk by, in this case, a bacterium. Cheddar cheese, yogurt, soy sauce, beer and wine, and vinegar are some edible byproducts of fermentation. I also put on here nail polish remover and rubbing alcohol, obviously not edible, but you'll see that they all started out with glucose or some other carbon-based food source, and then through fermentation, they've produced these edible, yummy compounds that we know and love. And you're going to notice there's bacteria that do that. There are yeast, there are other fungi, and even combinations of those that ferment many of the products that we know and love. I wanted to keep it short, so I just gave you 3 examples here. You can start from something like a soybean, and you can make so many different fermented products. If you want to click on that Wikipedia list there sometime, it had over 300 fermented compounds just coming from soybeans alone. But you may have heard of natto from soybeans, soy sauce, and tempeh. These are just a few soy-based examples. In the next slide are some fermented fruits and veggies and grains. So on the left is cabbage that got fermented into sauerkraut. Many of us have had that. Fermented barley malts, of course, being made into beer. Fermented chocolate. Not a lot of people realize that the cocoa beans have to be fermented as part of what makes the yummy chocolate, and even coffee beans for us. And even that loaf of sourdough has undergone fermentation, taking those grains and turning it into the yummy sourdough that we love. So our ancestors discovered that fermentation helps us preserve food. And that was really important. The high alcohol or high acids produced as the fermentation happened allowed the fermented food to keep longer when we didn't have refrigeration. They taste great, they don't rot, they preserve their nutrients. It was a really good way to preserve foods. And so we think that's originally where it kind of all started. But not only does fermentation preserve the nutrients in the food and keep it edible. But the microorganisms themselves that are doing the fermenting, they're doing lots of good for us stuff too. So we've been hearing about the microbiome since the early 90s, if not before, the prebiotics, the probiotics, right? And we now know that microbes are living on us and in us everywhere. And our bodies are kind of like gardens of microbes in a way, right? But we have to feed that garden in order to keep it healthy. And when we eat fermented foods, we're helping to keep the balance of good microbes high and bad microbes low. And that has had some powerful results in the research. We're finding it can improve our digestion, our immune system, reduce inflammation. There's even links to mental health with a happy, healthy microbiome. So to me, this makes these fermented foods a low cost, accessible way to support our physical and our mental health. So kind of to wrap up, fermentation is really just a process, one of the processes that cells can use to make energy. Fermented foods are really ancient and have lots of modern relevance. It's a natural process that can preserve and transform food and do good things for our minds and bodies. And the last slide is a TED Talk, you know, the TED Ed videos that dives a little bit deeper on the basics of fermentation. I highly recommend it. I think the facilitators promised me they would paste it into the chat. So I wish you all good health and lots of happy fermenting.
Thank you all. And I'll drop that video in the chat here, and also wanted to plug a couple other items. Jessica reached out to us and shared some information on Sac City College's Brew Ed curriculum, which I will also drop here in the chat. And then additionally, have some exciting information to share. Folsom Lake College's chemistry department recently launched a food and fermentation science course. So I'll go ahead and drop that in the chat just here in a second. But before I do so, I wanted to introduce our next speaker here, which is Professor Glenn Fox, and he is the Anheuser-Busch Endowed Professor of Malting and Brewing Science at UC Davis, where he leads brewing research and oversees the Sierra Nevada Brewing Research Lab. With a PhD in barley genetics and a DSc from the Stellenbosch University, his research focuses on the biochemical and genetic factors that influence malt and beer quality. Professor Fox has authored over 130 peer-reviewed articles and co-authored the second edition of Scientific Principles of Malting and Brewing. A fellow of the Institute of Brewing and Distilling, he's also the academic director for UC Davis Continuing and Professional Education brewing programs, and has mentored more than 50 graduate students across 3 continents. So we will kick it over to him next. And I'll note for Dr. Fox, I know that your camera's given you some issues, so we had a wonderful photo of hops here, and I'll kick it over to you.
Thank you, Caitlin, and thanks for the invitation and for everyone that got involved in organising this great event. I'm going to focus particularly on one of the products that Professor Coppola was talking about, and that's beer. And it's probably good to start with beer because it's been around the most frequently used fermented beverage and still the most consumed fermented beverage in the world. Other than mead, which might have been around a few thousand years before beer, people have been brewing beer for around 10,000 years. So there's a very long history, and part of that history was how it brought community together. And there might be one person in the village that was brewing beer, and everyone would go there, or they'd have a celebration or a big festival, and the neighboring communities would also bring some beer, and they'd all be sharing it and literally drinking from the same vessels. It's very different today where we all have our own glasses. In those days, it was very much just not being together, but literally eating out of the same plates, off the same plates, and drinking out of the same vessels was really a very communal process. We see that a lot today. A lot of communities will host an event at a local brewery, just so people can go there and socialize. But in recent times, we've seen both natural disasters as well as other social events that have brought the brewing community together. So when we had the wildfires in California, Sierra Nevada Brewing will often lead the Resilience Collaborative Brew, and a lot of breweries will brew beer and the profits from those sales go towards the community rebuilding projects. A brewery in Albuquerque, Bow and Arrow, has a native lands project where proceeds from the profits of that collaboration go to the Indigenous communities in those areas. And certainly in most recent history, the disasters in North Carolina. And we saw some really quite disturbing imagery of the massive floods and literally breweries getting washed away. So the community has rallied together, and a lot of breweries around the country and around the world were brewing beers so they could send some profits back to the North Carolina Brewers Guild. And that's one of the things we love about our industry, is how collaborative we are. I'm actually in Indianapolis at the moment attending the Craft Brewers Conference. That's an annual event. It's not that big, really. Only about 10,000 people go to that. That's a joke, of course. And we got around 600 exhibitors. And this is very much where we can sit down and have conversations around how the industry's traveling. And the updates from the industry at the moment are looking a little more positive than they were 12 months ago. It was looking a little grim because a lot of certainly the beer industry and some other alcohol industries are feeling some either changing political winds or changing environmental winds, changing economies. We think certainly in California things have stabilized, and talking to some other brewers in California this morning, they're feeling that things have stabilized a lot, and California, with over 1,000 craft breweries, leads the nation in craft beer production, but also trends in the industry. And we're seeing a lot of craft breweries getting into alternative beverages. I know the meat industry, or probably not the meat industry, but other industries talk about beyond meat or beyond beef. So the craft brewing industry is now talking beyond beer. So we get a lot of craft breweries now brewing cider, they're brewing kombucha, and that's really helping diversify their portfolio of products and allowing other people, other consumers to come in and be with everyone, and they don't necessarily like to drink beer. They can drink something else and still be part of the people we're out with. In terms of sort of the educational profile we look for in our industry, and I will add that the UC Davis program has an advantage over lots of other programs around, because we've been around since 1958, a few years before I was born. But it was really the industry that initiated that, and there's a long history to that, but it was 1958 when it first started at Davis, and has been running since then, and is the oldest university-based program in the US. And it's really set the stage for the whole craft industry. A lot of the big name craft brewers did come to Davis before they even started their breweries to get some brewing education. And the program is still seen as a pipeline to the brewing industry. And I get emails on a regular basis saying, when's the new cohort of graduates coming out? What are they looking like? So we really have to be on top of our game to be able to not just educate the students about the science of brewing, and certainly Jessica articulated the brief and basics of fermentation science, but also have the students understand that beyond brewing, there's many other roles working in a brewery. A lot of students think this is a very sexy type of industry. You just sit around designing beer recipes and brewing beer. That's probably about 10 to 20% of the job normally. There's lots of other things involved. So we keep it real about the amount of cleaning you will do as a brewer. We often describe ourselves as glorified janitors. If you own a brewery or you're head brewer, you're involved in so many other roles in ordering raw materials, ordering new equipment, being on top of the production schedules, being on top of staffing schedules. So often the brewing process itself is a very small role, but regardless, we have to understand that process. And through the Davis program, we have undergraduate, graduate, and continuing professional education. Our undergraduates are usually in their senior year. They have to have done science or engineering as part of the prerequisites, because we really do need people to have their heads around the science and more specifically the chemistry and biochemistry that's going on. And as Jessica showed, there's a number of steps involved in going from a sugar to produce alcohol. And all of those are through some enzyme process. So really, from the very start of making malt to the very finish of fermentation, we're talking about biochemistry. The industry is looking for graduates that have that knowledge. And we provide that knowledge, and there's lots of other colleges and community colleges. We're working with Jessica and other colleges around getting that sort of basic science information out there and available to students. But in terms of, if you walked into a brewery and you said you've been to UC Davis or you've been to a college, they're going to say, that's great. What do you know about brewing? And if you can talk about the process, that's very good. They'll be very impressed. But then they'll say, what do you know about troubleshooting? What happens when things go wrong? So we're often challenging our students about the critical thinking processes. What's going on? Why is it going on the way it is? What could be going on if it's not going to plan? And also brewers will be looking for fresh graduates that actually know how to design recipes, but also what each ingredient brings to certain beer styles. They'll have to know about quality testing because we can make lots of beer. And I have never met a brewer around the world that hasn't had to pour beer down the drain. Because things do not always go to plan. So they have to be able to troubleshoot, but also have to be able to measure quality and define quality. And there's some of the things that future employers in the brewing industry are looking for. There's lots of people do a lot of home brewing. They may get a job helping in the packaging and those sorts of roles in a brewery. But if you want to get onto a brew deck and be involved in the day-to-day brewing processes, well, then brewers are really looking for people that understand all of those aspects of making beer, from recipe design through to final product quality testing and everything that goes on in between. I think overall our industry is looking very bright. We have had a bit of a downturn in terms of total alcohol consumption, and generally, and it is a bit of a generational thing. The younger generations are always looking for the next thing, something different. So craft breweries have to be on board with those sorts of engagements. How do they pivot to a new beer style? How do they pivot to a different type of product? But also being able to make good, consistent beer quality. And that's the emphasis in our industry, is quality. At the moment, there's an increase in imported beer coming into the US. Craft beer is quite stable, well, maybe even a slight decline, and domestic non-craft beer is also fairly stable. It's the imported beer that's sort of got the increase at the moment. And again, that's because the younger generation is looking for what's out there, what's something a little different. So the international beer brands are offering that little bit something different. Overall, I'm really positive about our industry and how it's still going to succeed. We're always excited to have students coming into our program, whether they're coming through the UC Davis undergraduate program as freshmen or they're transferring from our friends at the community colleges around California. We're really excited about the future, and I just can't say enough about how much we love our industries and the passion that everyone brings to it.
Thank you so much, Dr. Fox. And I think we'll maybe stop screen sharing here for a second and just open it up for a little bit of audience Q&A. I haven't seen any questions arise in the chat quite yet, but I am hoping I can maybe put Dr. Coppola on the spot just to highlight the comment she just dropped in the chat, talking about the Sac City College program as a feeder program to the UC Davis program that Dr. Fox just mentioned. Jessica?
Sure. Yeah, I have to give credit to UCD. They are putting their action where their words are in terms of wanting to increase the diversity of students that are entering their brewing program. And so this all began as a conversation about, hey, Sac City is a pool of diversity, and we would like to attract that to our program. And so UC Davis took me under their wing and taught me a lot of stuff. I was able to take their master brewer program, and it's helped me to build this amazing course that has encouraged several students already, even though it's only been offered twice, to transfer over to their program, and others that haven't, right? Others that are becoming enthusiasts of beer and more understanding of how it's done, and perhaps even other areas of fermentation. Now that they've fermented something, they have those tools and skills. So I'm excited to see what other avenues students might be able to take once they're hooked on fermenting.
Thank you so much. Any questions for folks for Dr. Fox or Dr. Coppola? Or any thoughts in response to what they've shared? Alrighty. I know that I've been impressed. Our team has learned so much about fermentation through this process, and it's been super insightful hearing from you both. So thank you so much. Continuing on that theme, I think we'll jump back and share our slide deck one more time to introduce Ebony Joy Benzing. And I wanted to provide a little bio for Ebony. She is the director of the North Far North Center for Excellence over Labor Market Research, hosted by the Los Rios Community College District. She leads regional efforts to provide labor market data and technical support that help shape career education programs. Ebony brings a strong commitment to using data to connect students and adult learners to high-quality jobs. As a former educator, she holds dual bachelor's degrees from UC Davis and a Master of Public Administration from USC. Ebony lives here in Sacramento and enjoys cooking for her friends, family, and reading about design. And Ebony, we will kick it over to you next.
Thank you so much for the introduction. I wasn't expecting that actually, so it's kind of cool. Hi, everyone. I'm Ebony, as I was introduced before. Let me go ahead and get my slides up. Here we go. Okay, can you see the slide without the notes?
Beautiful. I love the
All
familiar
right.
veggies.
Awesome sauce. Okay, so hi again. My name is Ebony Joy Benzing, director of well, we have a couple different names, but today I'm just going to go with Greater Sacramento Center of Excellence for Labor Market Research. I've been in this role since about 2019, after I transitioned from teaching mathematics to high school students here in Sacramento. And it's been kind of a cool little ride. But the reason I'm here today is to talk about industrial fermentation and workforce needs in the Greater Sacramento subregion. So here's a quick overview, if I can get this to move forward, of the presentation. So I do want to start out with a quick about the Centers of Excellence, so you know who we are and what we do. And then we'll take a look at a definition for industrial fermentation. Definitions are really important to my work because they help ground what I am researching, and it lets me know how close or how far away I am from a particular topic. We'll take a look at some labor market information related to fermentation industries in our region, as well as some key workforce needs that I have identified on a very preliminary level. I'm going to say that right now. And then I'll highlight some educational pathways that seem to align with the occupations that I've identified. So let's go ahead and let me share about the Centers of Excellence for Labor Market Research. So we are a statewide organization that is attached to the California Community College Chancellor's Office. There are 8 regional centers of excellence and 1 statewide center, and our collective mission is to support the development of career education programs in California community colleges. Now, we typically do that by using data from industries, businesses, and occupations to answer questions like, what is the job outlook for students who are graduating from our programs? Which jobs provide access to a living wage? What skills are most in demand in our region? And where are there opportunities for the community colleges to support our communities in career and economic mobility. Our work typically supports investments into new and relevant career education programs. It also supports aligning existing programs to regional workforce needs, and our work is often cited for grant applications. So with all of that said, that's about COE. I want to start with a definition for industrial fermentation. I felt it was really important to distinguish between like fermentation, how we might think of it in terms of like, say you're at home and you're making some kimchi or you're making some pickles or you're making some sourdough bread, from what actually happens at the industry level. Don't get it wrong. Fermentation is an ancient process that has been around forever, and it's theoretically like the same. But in industrial fermentation, it's the intentional use of that ancient process to produce a commercial product at a large scale. So it still relies on microorganisms such as bacteria, yeast, and fungi to create those commercial products. Now, it's important to distinguish this because industrial fermentation is really a powerful process with a diverse application beyond the traditional food preservation things that we might associate it with. It's used in many industries, including but not limited to foods, beverages, producing medicines and vaccines, the creation of chemicals, biofuels, bioplastics, biogases, enzymes, and many, many more products. I did a lot of reading on this, so I learned so much about fermentation in the last couple of weeks. So understanding the application helped to ground the research that I was doing, because again, it told me where I needed to direct my attention and where I needed to kind of remove focus from, honestly. I also want to highlight that our region is actually well suited to support this sector and for it to grow because of several different things that are happening in our region. First up, we have very productive agricultural lands, which can provide feedstock that is needed for fermentation, and it offers an opportunity for what's called a closed-looped bioprocessing operation, which is the use of agricultural waste for microbial production or energy. Our region is also home to 3 large higher education systems in the public space, including 8 community colleges, Sacramento State and UC Davis. All of these institutions provide access to a STEM talent pipeline. And furthermore, UC Davis is known globally for its research in biotechnology, agriculture, chemical engineering, and microbiology. These institutions foster research industry partnerships and provide access to a skilled science-focused workforce. And lastly, we have the infrastructure and the real estate to kind of support these industries. So with that said, I want to move into some key industries related to fermentation in our region. So based on the literature that I've read over the last couple of weeks, I was able to identify 16 specific industries with sizable fermentation processes at the national level. And then I pulled regional data for those 16 industries. Our region includes 7 counties, which is El Dorado, Nevada, Placer, Sacramento, Sutter, Yolo, and Yuba. So I took all of that data from the 16 industries in our region and I grouped it into 5 areas based on what they're producing and what they do, basically. Those 5 areas are food and beverage. I separated out beer, wine, and distillation processes from food and beverage. So that'll be my second category. The third one is biofuels. The fourth one is pharmaceuticals. And the fifth one is biotechnology, research, and development. So overall, I identified about 7,100 jobs in these 16 industries in the Greater Sacramento region. The jobs in these 16 industries is projected to increase by 11% over the next 5 years, adding about 800 new jobs to our region by 2028. The average earnings per jobs overall across all 16 industries is about $87,800 annually, which exceeds the living wage threshold for Sacramento County. The hourly threshold for Sacramento County living wage is $26.76 per hour, which kind of calculates out to about $56,000 annually, assuming full-time employment. Now, let's take a look at each of these 5 groups. So for each group, I've provided an overview of jobs, projected changes within that industry group, earnings data, the number of businesses, and the percent of regions jobs found within those industries. I've also highlighted some key fermented products that typically come out of these industries, but it's important to keep in mind that these are really examples and they may not actually be produced here. When possible, I've provided the name of a couple local businesses in these industries. I use the EDD Labor Market Information Division's tool to look up companies that were registered under each of the industry codes associated with these groups. And I do want to say that I did my best to vet them by kind of looking into the businesses themselves and saying, hey, is it likely that they're using fermentation as a process? But it probably needs a little bit more vetting, honestly. So if you see something on there and you're like, they don't do anything with fermentation, don't shoot the messenger. I tried my best. Thank you. And I've also highlighted some national trends that are related to these industries, but at the national level. So first group I want to talk about is fermentation in foods and beverages. Of the 50 distinct industry codes for foods and beverages in the North America area, there were about 9 industry codes that identified as having or using fermentation as one of their main processes. So this summary is based off of those 9 industry codes. And it includes businesses that are engaged in fruit and vegetable canning, dairy product manufacturing, not milk itself, but like dry condensed milk and some other kind of product manufacturing, commercial bakeries, miscellaneous food manufacturing, and soft drink companies. In Greater Sacramento, there were around 2,600 jobs in these 9 industries in 2023, and these jobs are projected to decrease slightly by 1% over the next 5 years. Most of that decline, or all of that decline, is actually driven by job loss in the soft drink manufacturing industry in our region, which also happens to be the industry with the most or largest number of jobs in this specific group. So any kind of significant changes or losses or gains in that are going to reflect heavily on this group overall. About 0.2% of the region's jobs are found within this group, and then some local companies that I thought might use fermentation processes include Viticulture Sauce Company, Kikkoman Foods, and Pepsi Beverages. Pepsi Beverages acquired Kavita, which is a kombucha brand, I want to say 2017, 2018. So, and they've been manufacturing kombucha since then. I included this slide because I thought it was kind of a cool graphic around the traditional foods that use fermentation. So it's just a nice little graphic just to highlight, hey, there are a lot of traditional foods or cultural foods that involve fermentation. And some of them are listed here. The second group I want to talk about, which I pulled out separate from food and beverages, are the breweries, distilleries, and wineries. That's 3 distinct industry codes. Using the EDD data set, I've estimated that there are 88 breweries, 137 wineries, and 13 distilleries located in our 7-county region. Together, these 3 industries contained 2,100 jobs in 2023, and these jobs are projected to increase by 18%, adding nearly 390 new jobs by 2028. Most of that job growth, about 340 of those jobs, is going to come from job growth in the breweries and in the wineries. The third group I want to call out are the biofuel technology kind of industries. There's only 2 industry codes here. It includes ethyl alcohol or ethanol manufacturing, and then another industry called other basic organic chemical manufacturing. Now, biofuels are fuels that are derived from renewable biological sources. A fantastic example of this is something that we are all aware of or heard of is ethanol, which is typically manufactured from corn. These industries are particularly important because they provide feedstock to various industrial processes and other industries, and they also serve as a solvent, antiseptic, and energy source for the biotechnology sector. In 2023, there were about 700 jobs in our region from about 20 businesses. Fourth group I'd like to highlight are the pharmaceutical manufacturers in our region. This group includes all medicinal, botanical, pharmaceutical, and biological product manufacturing in our region. Key products that involve fermentation in this group include antibiotics such as penicillin, insulin, and then the MMR and the hepatitis B vaccines. They all use fermentation as part of their production processes. In 2023, there were 930 jobs in the pharmaceutical industries in Greater Sacramento. This particular group has a high projected job growth rate over the next 5 years at 23%, with a net job gain of 200 new jobs by 2028. I'm calling it a net job gain because there are some job losses happening in one of the industries associated with this group. That's the pharmaceutical preparation manufacturing industry. The losses that are happening in that particular industry are offset by the gains in 2 particular industries. Or actually one particular industry, medicinal and botanical manufacturing industry. Last group I want to highlight is biotechnology research and development. This is one industry code. It's biotechnology research and development. In 2023, there were just over 1,200 jobs in our region, and it's projected to grow by 17% over the next 5 years. One thing that I do want to point out is trying to identify some local companies for this particular industry was challenging. I wasn't sure when I was looking at the ED list how reliable some of those employers were on the list, because I was seeing a mix of things that I would think would go into other industry codes. So I used Google and read some articles to identify these companies that I've listed up here. So that includes Gemini Bio, Orca Bio, Bioconsortia, Biome Makers, and Penumbra. Other examples of industrial fermentation based off of just the things that I've read in the last couple of weeks, I identified different types of things happening in agriculture, waste management, environmental remediation, and cosmetics. Cosmetics is a favorite of mine because I do use fermented skincare products. And you'll have access to these slides so that you can do a closer look at these if you're interested in that. Okay, so let's go ahead and move into some workforce needs. So again, this kind of look at the data is really intended to be kind of a preliminary look. I'm going to acknowledge that there needs to be a little bit more work done in this area to kind of make sure that what I'm putting up here actually is representative of our regional needs. But first, I'm going to start with occupational groups. So to better understand the types of jobs found within the Greater Sacramento's fermentation sector, I analyzed something called staffing patterns. Staffing patterns essentially tell us the types of occupations, the number of jobs, and their level of concentration within a particular industry or group of industries. So for the 16 industries that I looked at for the fermentation sector here in Greater Sacramento, I've identified these occupations on the left-hand side as the major occupational groups employed within the sector. The chart on the left-hand side that I was just talking about shows the 2020 3 job numbers by major occupational group. I want you to kind of focus at the very top of that because those 3 occupation groups right there, production, food preparation and serving related occupations, and transportation and material moving occupations represent about 50% of the employment within the fermentation sector here in Greater Sacramento. The chart on the right-hand side is a breakdown of skill level. So COA uses a skill level designation to understand what occupations might be targets for community college training programs. We are primarily concerned with middle skill occupations. And middle skill stands for, or middle skill occupations are those that typically require more training and education than a high school diploma, but less than a 4-year degree. Below middle skill would be high school diploma, no formal education requirements, and then above middle skill typically includes bachelor degrees, graduate degrees, and other kinds of higher levels of education or additional workforce experience that's needed to get into those occupations. So based off this chart, you'll see that 51% of the jobs within Greater Sacramento's fermentation sector are either middle skill or above middle skill. Now, one of the main questions that I had in my head is, hey, Ebony, what are the key middle skill occupations employed within the fermentation sector here in Greater Sacramento? And I've got 2 tables kind of summarizing the data here, and it's based off of 2 different looks. The table on the left-hand side would be occupations that might be typical career education targets and are also industry-specific occupations. What I mean by industry-specific is that they're not like really general occupations. They perform a very like specific task within the sector related to what we're talking about. So these would be roles that are engaged in something having to do with fermentation within a sector. It may not always be like the production piece of any kind of fermented products, but something else kind of really aligned to that. The table on the right-hand side, STEM-focused occupations. Those are all our science, technology, engineering, and mathematics occupations. So yeah, that's what's kind of here. I've also provided data on the number of jobs found within a sector for each of those occupations, as well as the median hourly earnings. One thing that I do want to highlight is this first occupation in the table here, separating, filtering, clarifying, precipitating, and still machine setters, operators, and tenders. It's a long phrase. This is an occupation that is typically associated with people who are making beer and people who are making wine. It's also associated with individuals in our soft drink manufacturing. So individuals who are tending to machinery that are producing beverages. So this could also be associated with like large scale brewing operations as well. I've also put together a similar list for above middle skill occupations. Again, above middle skill occupations are those that require a bachelor's degree or additional training and education beyond that bachelor's degree for somebody to enter the job or occupation. So again, I have highlighted some career education targets. And in the sense of community colleges, these might be like transfer oriented or occupations that we already kind of target through existing career education programs. And I've also provided some STEM focused occupations for our above middle skill group. The other part of this workforce need analysis is based off of job postings analysis. So here I looked at job postings to get a sense of recent workforce trends. And when I say recent, I'm talking about the last 12 months. And performed an analysis of those online job postings related to the 16 fermentation industries. Overall, there were nearly 2,200 unique or deduplicated online job postings related to these industries. And those came from about 163 employers in our region. And then most posts came from 2 kind of industries: pharmaceutical preparation manufacturing, which is this first purple bar, and soft drink manufacturing, which is the second purple bar. One industry is actually missing from this list. I only have 15 of the 16 up here. The industry that's missing is the ethyl alcohol manufacturing industry. It doesn't mean that there were 0 job postings from that industry. It's something for me to take a closer look at because it could have more to do with how businesses are coded to industry codes and how those industry codes show up in the job posting tool that I use to do this analysis. So something to take a closer look at. Now, this is a breakdown of the most online job postings from employers, the occupations with the most postings, and then the job titles with the most postings. You'll see from the employer side, which is in this blue table, a mix of pharmaceutical companies and software manufacturing companies. Which is fairly representative of what I expect to see because those were, again, my two top industries with the most job postings. In terms of occupations, which is this green table in the middle, we have a mix of sales related occupations, so sales representatives, sales managers, and I would even say kind of like marketing related occupations, this merchandise displayers and window trimmers kind of occupation. And then we have like 2 kind of STEM kind of oriented occupations that pop to the top here, medical and health service managers, and then medical scientists except epidemiologists. These were the top 10 occupations or 8 occupations with the most job postings over the last 12 months. In terms of job titles, again, it's fairly representative of what we see here in terms of the occupations. They kind of play off each other. So you've got merchandisers, you've got commercial truck drivers, you've got team members, which is like usually a sales representative position. I did highlight one because the title stood out to me as a very interesting one, and I was curious what that was all about. Companion Animal Department Managers. That is a position that is specifically related to Merck and Company. And it has to do with their companion animal health division of their organization. Up next, I was really curious about how the key occupations I identified from the staffing patterns showed up in the job postings. So I did a little bit of a deeper dive to see how many job postings showed up for each of those occupations I identified, both middle skill occupations and above middle skill occupations. And this is just a breakdown of the number of job postings from the last 12 months for each of those. You'll see that with the middle skill occupations, most job postings came from the sales representative category, followed up by inspectors, testers, sorters, samplers, and weighers, and then clinical laboratory technologists and technicians within the fermentation sector. For above middle skills, natural science managers had the most job postings in the last 12 months for the fermentation sector here in Greater Sacramento. Kind of looking at it this way is nice because it lets me know, hey, what is happening specifically in our region right now related to kind of our sector? And are these kind of needs that are potentially kind of on trend or matching what I'm seeing in traditional labor market data? Or are they a little bit different? In this case, it looks a little bit different to me. So last part of the job postings analysis, this shows the most desired skills that came from the last 12 months of job postings related to the fermentation sector. We have specialized skills, which tend to be occupation specific. We have common / soft / employability skills. These are skills that tend to transverse multiple industries and occupations. And then we have software skills. Again, sometimes the software skills are occupation specific. A lot of times they're kind of like the expectation around working in a computing environment. What is the software expected to know? So for instance, most of us are expected to know how to operate in a Microsoft Office Windows and Windows platform, basically. So again, specialized skills, pharmaceuticals at the top. No surprise because pharmaceutical industry had the most job postings, so I expect this to rise to the top. Biotechnology is a really interesting entrance on this. Because given the positions that I was seeing in terms of the number of job postings, I wouldn't have expected this to be as high up as it is. So I'm going to close out my presentation by talking about local educational pathways. My goal with this section was to identify existing training and educational pathways that were relevant to the fermentation sector here in Greater Sacramento. To do that, I started by gathering a list of programs based off of some standardized titles. So within the community college system, we use the taxonomy of programs list, which highlights different programmatic areas. And then for everybody else outside of the community college system, that includes public and private universities within our region, they use the classified instructional programs taxonomy, which is managed by the federal government. So based off of identifying kind of like some program areas, I went through and I sorted through to see what actually exists in a region. And this is a nice summary of the types of programs that exist in our region, both at the community college in terms of career education. So these are our career education top codes. And then what I will refer to as general education. So biology, chemistry, engineering, microbiology. These are typically kind of like transfer-oriented pathways. And then bachelor degree programs. Bachelor degree programs come from 3 universities, mostly UC Davis, followed by Sac State, and then a private university here called William Jessup. And then lastly, master's and doctorate programs at UC Davis. Overall, this is just kind of a summary of the awards related to those different program areas. We have the community colleges on the left-hand side, and we have bachelor and graduate degrees on the right-hand side. Again, bachelor and graduate degrees, 3 institutions, primarily driven by the awards from UC Davis. I think like something like 98% of the awards are coming from UC Davis, honestly. And then I just have a quick breakdown here. So we had an average of 38 community college certificates, almost 400 associate degrees, 110 associate transfer degrees, 312 bachelor degrees, and 64 graduate degrees released or conferred from programs related to fermentation in our region. So to close, I just want to say that, you know, fermentation-based industries are really essential to biotechnology. And it's really important for them to be here in order for biotechnology to grow and flourish in our region. Workforce is key to that growth and innovation. However, we need to do a little bit more, we need to do a lot more research to fully understand the specific needs within this in our region. And I just want to put a shout out there because I did have this ask. It's been on my desk for a little bit, is to conduct a labor market profile of biotechnology in Greater Sacramento. So that'll be something that I'm working on this summer. Okay, I think that's it. Here's my contact information. If you have any other questions, please ask now or feel free to reach out to me. All right, I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Thank you,
There
Ebony.
we
And
go.
I know we've had some chatter here.
Okay.
I know Maximilian, you had a question earlier, which I think might be more pertinent for Jessica. So I'll put a pin in that question and loop back to it. But curious for other folks. And I think one thing to note too, and I know Ebony, you mentioned this, but it's so insightful to have the labor market data. But of course, we know that labor market data isn't reflective of everything. It would be hard to find all of that. And I think Dr. Fox, you make a great point in the chat on some of the craft brewing industry doesn't advertise or post those jobs, right? Which would make it difficult for you to find, correct, Ebony?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Particularly so like craft brewing, wineries and stuff like that, especially if we're like thinking about, oh, I want my students to get into very specific roles related to making beer or wine. Those are not really advertised. That's more of kind of like a network, word of mouth type of thing, who you know kind of connection. The things that are advertised in relation to those industries are sales related positions, service oriented positions. So being able to like, hey, being in a customer facing role where you're either kind of operating like a tap or you're pouring a glass of wine from behind a bar or something like that. That's what typically shows up in job postings for the wine and beer industry here in Greater Sacramento. Distillery, distillery is on a really tiny scale compared to wine and beer in our industry. But again, the sentiment is still echoed. It's the same thing. It would be sales related, customer facing positions. But when it comes into crafting and making and manufacturing, those roles specifically, those tend to be word of mouth.
Thank you so much. And I saw another a comment, David Ogilvie noted, it seems like there's a gap in availability of affordable certification programs outside of UC Davis, which is a great point, David. That's part of what brought Ebony and Jessica and Aaron Kangas, our other planning partner, together is Sac City College and Folsom Lake and some of these other local programs helping to support that and providing affordable certification. And Dr. Coppola, welcome if you want to add anything on that. I know you also had a question on community college food science degrees as a part of the data.
Oh, I just, in that last list that you had, Ebony, of the different degrees that people were getting at the four-year colleges and the community colleges, I didn't see food science on that one.
Yeah, let me pull that back up and talk about it. So here it is. So the list, okay, I don't even know where I'm looking now.
It was your very last slide before your concluding one.
Was it this one? Oh wait, can you see it?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, cool. So here, it's just a count of awards from the last 3 years and then average. Food science, I think, had an average less than 1, basically, so it wasn't included on this slide. So, but the food science program does exist, which is why I kind of noted the overall category here in career education. So anything with an average less than 1, I just kind of took it off of here to have like a nice clean graphic, honestly, and not have it kind of cluttered up with a lot of like interesting decimal points and stuff.
Gotcha. With such a big bar on the four-year college side, on the bachelor's degree side, it makes me wonder if students are transferring and not completing an associate's degree, but just taking the prerequisite courses and transferring without it. Interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. And that's something that we could look at. And that might be like a kind of initiative to kind of take on within a community college space for sure.
And one question to Ebony, just out of curiosity, I know saw another question in the chat. Can you share about like the time frame that this data is from? And I'm sure you have it cited.
Yeah, I do. No, I don't have it cited. Thanks for asking. Okay, so community college award data is the last 3 years. So 23, 24 is the third year. The bachelor degree and graduate awards, we tend to be off by about a year. So that goes the last academic year included in that data set would be 22, 23, basically. Sources for the data, community college data comes directly from Datamart because that's updated on a regular basis, and I like to use the latest data. The bachelor and graduate awards, I use a couple different sources. I use Lightcast. The COE also has its own supply tool that I use as well. And then if I really need to, I go dig into the federal data set from NCES, so National Career Education Statistics Center, and pull the data directly from their website.
Thank you so much. And Raef, I found your comment in the chat super interesting. Can I put you on the spot to share that?
Yeah, I just said that a lot of this seemed to be focused on moving people through education into new or existing jobs versus moving or growing existing employees into those positions. And that's what we do. And hi, everyone, Raef Porter, I'm co-owner of Bike Dog Brewing. That's often what we do is actually find that, talent within our own cohort. And it kind of gets to the point of, a lot of stuff in the craft beer industry is word of mouth. And a lot of it is homegrown as well. I think you'll see this at a lot of breweries where you have people that might be working front of house, and we provide training both hands-on, and we do have some sources. And it's good to know that there are new sources now here locally that we can train people. So I think there's a lot in the craft beer industry that moves more that direction. It's kind of homegrown and promoting people from within.
Yeah, I'll echo that for sure. Most of my presentations tend to be focused on new entrants into the workforce rather than kind of like the reskilling, upskilling piece. And I think that the reskilling and upskilling piece does come in later. It's just not a component of the preliminary data sets that I'm looking at just yet. So, thank you.
That is actually a perfect transition. Raef is on our employer panel, which we'll hear just shortly. So I'll encourage folks, if there's further conversation with Ebony, please feel free to drop that in the chat. We can do a little back and forth in there. But I will tee up my colleagues to share screen here. Wondrous. Thank you so much. And I will kick it over to Liz Kilkenny on our team for our industry panel discussion.
Awesome. Thank you. And thank you, Ebony. I just want to echo what you said. I've been on such a learning curve on the journey of fermentation and planning this advisory, and just learning the breadth of employers that actually use fermentation within their industry has been so fascinating for us. So really excited to hear that. And, nothing brings people better together than talking about beer, wine, and labor market data. So excited to have all of that. Thank you very much, Ebony. With that, we can introduce our panelists and move to the next slide. Very excited to have the assortment of panelists that we're having today from the different industries within fermentation. We have Jacqueline Samson, the Director of Plant Operations and Engineering at Better Meat Co. in West Sacramento, where she oversees the pilot plant operations and supports the industrial efforts. Her background is in chemical engineering and industrial fermentation. Prior to joining the team at Better Meat Company, she has been fortunate enough to find a career path that she's passionate about and allows her to help turn an impactful and innovative solutions into reality. We also have David Ogilvie. He is the Director of Production and co-owner at Wilson Farms and Ogilvie Merwin Ventures. He manages his family's fourth generation Clarksburg vineyard and produces premium wines under the Silt Wine Company name and Fellows Wine labels. He is a UC Davis graduate and viticulture and enology with a master's brewer certificate. David combines deep agricultural roots with modern farming and winemaking practices. He previously worked at Anheuser-Busch and now champions sustainability and innovation in viticulture. David also a Class 52 Fellow of California Agricultural Leadership Program and co-chair of the Sacramento Metro Chamber and Ag Committee. We have another UC Davis alum with Justin Boeger. He is the owner and winemaker at Boeger Winery, a family-owned estate in Placerville, California, who helped pioneer the revitalization of El Dorado County's wine industry. He is a UC graduate student of fermentation science, and under Justin's guidance, Boeger Winery continues its legacy and innovation and excellence in California winemaking in the Sierra foothills. And then finally, we have Raef Porter, the community-focused entrepreneur and sustainability leader with 20 years of experience in the public sector innovation and in regional planning. He is the co-owner of Bike Dog Brewing Company, a West Sacramento-based craft brewery founded in 2013. He brings practical insight into the industry through the intersection of brewing, local economy, and smart growth. Raef also has a deep experience in transportation and climate planning, having led major initiatives from across the Sacramento region. He holds a master's in urban and regional planning from Portland State University and is passionate about supporting a thriving, connected communities, including those built around great local beer. So with that, we welcome our panelists. And I can go with the first question, and I can pick on David because he's next to me on the screen with, could we please provide an overview of your organization and business, including the roles and main services that you provide through your organization?
Yeah, hi, thank you. Can you guys hear me okay? I'm kind of doing a dual phone and computer thing. I was having a volume issue on my computer. Well, thank you for inviting me to this panel. I love talking about agriculture and the future of ag. And I actually, in a previous life, was a substitute teacher and really do strive to help out our education system. So I am as was mentioned, I'm a fourth generation farmer in Clarksburg, just 20 minutes down the river from downtown Sacramento. Um, we I left my family's farm, went to UC Davis, studied viticulture and enology, and after school, after Davis, I traveled for a couple years and around the world and made wine in different countries and realized that, you know, if you want to meet people and talk to people, you need to drink beer, not wine, a lot of times. And so found another passion for fermentation of making beer. And my now wife and girlfriend, went to Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia, and I found myself out there, and I couldn't ferment grapes, so I started homebrewing and developed that passion further. And then went. The plan was to come back to family farm, but this was about 2004 or so. And or actually I take it back, it was about 2008, and the farm just had a couple bad years in a row, and they said, we can't hire you right now. So I took that new passion back to UC Davis and went through the Master Brewer Certificate course with the wonderful instruction of uh, Doctors Charlie Banforth and Michael Lewis. And they encouraged me, Dr. Lewis actually encouraged me to apply for a position at Anheuser-Busch. And I started out, I had already actually had a position there working in the lab. And then when I went back, I said, hey, I'm ready to go into management. And eventually, this is right when they got bought out by InBev, but eventually I went back. I did get into brewing management in Williamsburg, Virginia, and I was there for about 4 years, moving up the ranks and eventually running the brew house. And then coming back to the family farm, which was ready to have me, and I quickly started my own wine brand with my brother and another friend, Tom Merwin. So we started Ogilvie Merwin Vintners in 2014. Started our first brand called Muddy Boot Wine, and then Silt Wine Company, which our tasting room is in an old barn on the property on our family's farm. And then I got more involved in other, this can be talked about later, but being in agriculture, being in production, you're always trying to find the next thing and be nimble, be relevant, and that leads to a bunch of different products. So we can talk about that. But that's my background. And
Awesome.
actually, I should say on the farming side, I'm involved in a lot of being kind of the tip of the spear on new ag tech stuff. I've got an autonomous tractor that's working right now, and a lot of sustainable measures and soil moisture probes and VFDs and that sort of thing. So.
Awesome. Thank you so much, David. And since you already mentioned it, the best way to connect is over beer. I'm going to have to pass this question over to Raef. Could you provide us a brief overview of your business and what services and products you guys provide?
Sure. Yeah. So Black Dog Brewing has a production facility in West Sacramento. And then we have 3 tap rooms, 1 in Sacramento and 2 in Sacramento. And then we provide, through distribution, beer all the way from Chico down south to probably Fresno and everything east to west from there. So relatively small still in terms of brewing, but I've grown quite a bit from just one small little tap room in West Sacramento, just serving beer to whoever happened to be walking in the door. My role has changed. I went from brewing beer and washing kegs and working in the tap room to basically running the tap rooms. As you mentioned in my overview, that I had 25 plus years of public service. I'm happy to announce that I retired at the end of 2024. So I'm now doing this full time, and it's been fantastic. But yeah, so I think the role of a small brewery versus, medium and smalls is you have probably 15 different hats. So if there's something that needs to be done at the brewery, front of house or back of house, you can count on me being there being there to do that. We do have 24 employees at this point. And they are, all also wearing multiple hats, but there's just a lot of things that need to be done. So I do them all.
Awesome. And congratulations on retiring and then immediately picking up another job. That seems to be a common tact. And we can pass it over to Justin, just finish out the drink portion maybe of this section.
The drink portion, yeah. So I'm with Boeger Winery. We longtime winery in El Dorado County. We started in 1972, so we're in our 53rd year this year, and family business. I grew up in it. Went away to UC Davis, enrolled in the fermentation science program, not really wanting to go into the wine industry. I tried to do everything else I could. After I took my first wine course, after about the 3rd year, I took a brewing course actually there before I took a wine course. I decided to go through with it and finished up my degree. I just had some Silt wine in the Aggies Uncorked shipment, I think, David. It was delicious. Anyways, and then I just my screensaver background there is the winery I worked at in Germany. I got a big appreciation for beer. The winery was underneath that building, actually. So I worked in the dungeon from before sunrise to after sunset. We are a vineyard and winery. We farm about 100 acres for our neck of the woods. We're fairly big, but in the grand scheme of things, we're a small winery. We do direct to consumer and wholesale sales of wines, and all the associated marketed events that you have to do to actually sell your wine direct to consumer on the property. That's about it for me.
Awesome. Thank you, Justin. As a child of El Dorado County, I've been there with a stepsister 1 or 2 times to Boeger Winery, I have to admit. So fun to see it all come together for me. And then Jacqueline, can we pass it to you?
Yeah, of course. So my name's Jacqueline Samson, and I work at the Better Meat Co. I'm the Director of Plant Ops and Engineering here. So we're a startup mycelium fermentation company. We've been around for about 7 years now, with a pilot plant in West Sacramento that was built in about 2021. We are a business-to-business food ingredient protein company. So our target consumers, instead of being, we get questions all the time, can we buy your product at the grocery store or something like that? But our target consumers are other businesses that would then formulate our protein ingredient into food applications. So we make this ingredient using mycelium fermentation. So it is a fungal fermentation, where one thing that's a little bit unique from other fermentations is that the biomass is our product. So we have to separate the biomass from the liquid, but we actually want to keep the biomass. And that's what we end up dehydrating, and has really good meat-like texture that can be formulated into a lot of different food applications, both as a hybrid product where it's blended with real animal meat, or completely plant-based or fungi-based, I could say. So that's a little bit about the Better Meat Co. And then my role specifically as the Director of Plant Ops and Engineering. So we have our pilot plant. So we get to oversee all of the uses and collaborations with both our research and development team and our product development team, and developing our process. But we're also actively working on scaling up our process and reaching commercial scale. So I get to be hugely involved with those scale-up conversations. And since I do have a background in industrial fermentation, I previously worked at a industrial facility in the Corn Belt that was co-located with a Cargill corn manufacturing facility. I get to bring that mindset. I was a plant engineer at that time, and I get to bring that mindset of manufacturing and what it takes to see a process of fermentation at full scale to our R&D and pilot facility team here.
Wow, thank you. Yeah, we were in a meeting a couple of weeks ago with UCNA, one of UCNA's directors, and they called out Better Meat Co. as doing something special. in West Sacramento. So I was excited to have you on the panel. And that also is a really natural segue into what key demands, occupations, and skills are you looking for? Which roles are you having the most hiring, challenges hiring? And I would love to pass that to you, Jacqueline, as the first question.
For sure. So I mentioned our three key technology areas that we have: product development, research and development, and then our pilot plant team. As a part of that, we have food scientists, food technologists, we have scientists, but I would say the one that's hardest, another one I didn't mention was food safety and quality assurance as well. But the one that I would say is hardest to search and hire for, which I think all of the conversations up to this point have been very relevant for, is our operations, our pilot plant operations. So currently our team has a wide range of backgrounds, ranging from chemical engineering to not having a bachelor's degree, and everyone is able to bring very different mindsets and skill sets to our operations team. But up to this point, it's not something that we've looked at community college certificates for, and I think it's a great opportunity in the future to have that that type of pathway, because having operations skills, but with that additional like fermentation process background is really, really important.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And we can pass it to Justin. We'll snake back around through it, keeping you all on your toes.
So your order of speakers must be different than mine on the screen, because I definitely was somewhere else in the lineup, but I'm ready. Yeah, for us, I mean, any of the, all the jobs from training vines to production of wine require a certain amount of skill, and that skill needs to be taught. And so we're always looking for people who already have that skill, or at least some education in those areas. Of course, we do hire people that have no experience in the cellar sometimes, but that's usually during the busiest time of year at harvest. And so you spend 2 months training, and then harvest is over, and then they go off. And so that's tough. So when we're looking to hire people, and especially as you get higher up, if you're getting into assistant winemaker, enologist, winemaking, any amount of education that they have, for me, my biggest, the knowing the science behind fermentation makes the prevention of problems easier, makes the solving of problems easier, makes the solving of problems using the minimal amount of intervention possible. So for us, finding people who have that education, or some amount of it already, even, not necessarily a full 4-year degree, but some amount of training, like you might find at Folsom Lake College, would love, is a real high value for us in the hiring process. And it's not always easy to find. Yeah.
Awesome. And then just a little bit of background for everyone on the call. Claire Kessler is an instructor at Folsom Lake College and is also an employee over at Boeger Winery, and was a good connector for us and has just been wonderful in that. So good props to Folsom Lake College in that moment. And we can give it to Raef to see if there's any key in-demand occupations or skills, any workforce challenges that you're facing. What are the largest ones?
Yeah, sure. On the production side, and I think Dr. Fox talked about this, is that they're not always the glamorous positions, are kind of the harder ones to fill. Nobody wants to sit around cleaning kegs and cleaning tanks all day long, but those things are incredibly important. You can't be putting product into something that's not clean. You're going to contaminate and ruin a whole thing. So those are the positions that are often the hardest to fill, because they're the least sexy. Everybody wants to be on the brew deck, brewing beer, but that's not always the thing that, needs to happen all of the time. In terms of skill, though, and I think we already talked about this a little bit, is that oftentimes in the craft beer industry, I think this is very different from what you're going to have on a large scale production breweries, is that you're either going to poach from each other, steal a brewer from somebody else, or find somebody that's already been trained at another brewery and you can bring them on, or train staff that you have and grow them up. So somebody may be working in the packaging or cellaring and want to get on the brew deck, and so you provide a little bit of hands-on training, but also we do find opportunities to send them to get some training We have used UC Davis in the past, and we would probably do that again. So, but again, I think it's those, I think we talked about the different skill sets, and it is the kind of the lower training and lower skill that is the hardest to find. But I think if you're finding the right people that know that they have to kind of go through that, so maybe this is something to kind of put in your course curriculum, is that oftentimes you maybe have to start as the low person on the totem pole and make your way up. There might not necessarily be training for being a cellaring person or a cleaning person, but just understanding that that might be the role to start with, and then you can move your way up.
Awesome. Thank you, Raef. It seems true across the entire NOJ industry, is like that cleaning portion, number one concern. And then David, I would love to hear from you.
Yeah, I'll speak to two different things. Can you guys hear me okay? Yeah. All right. So on the farming side, farming is in the age right now of doing more with less labor, and or doing the same with less labor. And that's being pushed by the ag tech as well. I mean, that's why ag tech is becoming so important, where we can irrigate from our phones, having valves go on and off remotely, using autonomous tractors. So having now, how do you train for that? It's really hard to train someone to understand those things if they're not already on the ranch, on the farm, doing it the old way. And so I'm for tackling that problem, I'm looking at training from within. And as we do less manual irrigation, I need something for that guy to do anyway, right? And where I can have one person in charge of all the irrigation of we farm 1,500 acres. I can have one person implement the irrigation plan for all 1,500 acres, and all they're doing all day is going around and checking that there's no leaks, instead of going and opening and closing valves, and that sort of thing. And one person is maintaining and monitoring 3 autonomous tractors. Right now, I only have 1 autonomous tractor. It still requires one person to make sure it's set up correctly. But in general, and then on the winery side, I'm not really hiring anyone right now, and we're at a good spot. But looking back at how I have hired in the past, I am a firm believer in the soft skill side of things, and what we're doing. And I really liked what Jacqueline said, is finding someone who's good at process and managing a plant kind of situation, and how to think through problems, and has the desire to succeed, and motivated, self-motivated, someone who can handle a challenge and persevere. Those kind of things, I think that a lot of young people, they need to get into the industry and work. Even if you have a degree from UC Davis, if you are cream of the crop and have a degree from UC Davis and was the best student, you're still going to fail if you don't have the ability to persevere in challenging moments. And it's as simple as meeting a potential employer and looking them straight in the eye and shaking their hand. How many people I've met and they can't look me in the eye, and it's like, how can I hire a person who can't look me in the eye? You're representing my company. I need you to show a certain level of confidence in yourself. So there's those things that are really important, and I totally believe that if I would much rather find the right person with those attributes and then train them to be the person I need them to be. And we've done that with a warehouse manager. They started out, as an event, working for my sister, serving wine at wedding events. And now they're running our whole warehouse. They've had to learn how to do that, and we've helped her, we've coached her. And then she took on our wine club because she realized she said, I'm dealing with the wine club members all the time to make sure they're getting the wines that they selected for shipments. And so our warehouse manager said, yeah, I can take this on because we had some restructuring, and she's killing it. She's doing great. And it's because she's very detail oriented. She's motivated. She wants to get the job done correctly, 100% of the time. I often think she's a little too hard on herself when she doesn't get it correct. And but yeah, I mean, those are the skills that really need to be kind of. Sometimes those skills aren't just taught in a classroom, I guess.
So often on these advisories, we hear about the soft skills, but it's interesting to me to hear the project management part coming out in this, and the management over the warehouse and all of those things. And then also how Raef also mentioned that getting in early and maybe at one of those baseline employees and working your way up is a really good way to get in. And then, so with that, I would love to move on to question number 3. And then just to keep everyone on their toes, we'll pass it to Justin, and we'll be, how can individuals enter these jobs? What specific experiences or skills do you seek in a worker to support these processes?
Well, just getting your foot in the door is key. Whether you can get one of those internship positions that I kind of referred to before, and then start networking within the industry. The wine industry, I'm assuming probably brewing. Well, actually, Raef mentioned it. A lot of, at least in the smaller side, skill and talent goes around between different facilities. We all kind of know each other. Those of us in the wine industry, most of us went to school together in some form or another if we're here in California. And so just getting your foot in the door, getting some training experience anywhere is a good start, because then, we bring on temporary workers in seasonal workers during the harvest. Sometimes they're great workers, but in a smaller place like us, we don't have room for them. But I know someone who's got a bigger winery somewhere who is looking for someone, and that's a good, just a word of mouth away from another job down there. So for that same reason, finding, when we see potential employees that have experience, that's worth a lot. So the biggest key is just getting your foot in the door, and an easier way that helps you get your foot in the door is if you have some of that background of what the actual process of fermentation is. And the science behind it, then that's going to help you get the foot in the door. Once you found the door you want to get your foot through.
Awesome. And I would love to actually pass it to Jacqueline, since you're slightly in a different field within the fermentation industry. I would love to hear about how somebody could enter into your field and what expectations you have.
Yeah. So we certainly don't expect people to come in with mycelium fermentation experience, but like has been already stated, any experience with any part of our process is a plus. So fermentation experience in general, definitely. Anything, since we make a food product, like GMP experience related to like familiarity with food manufacturing. And same with like microbiology, more on like the R&D side, but certainly for sure similarly to everybody else here, but we definitely consider brewing, any type of brewing or alcohol fermentation experience, a plus, because especially in this region, that's the most common. And we've had plenty of people work here with that background. And although there are a lot of differences, it's a fantastic foundation and translates pretty well. So it's it's certainly a good foundation. One thing that I would also say, like any general trades, like having experience of like maintenance technician, electrical, automation, like familiar with not necessarily needing to know how to code, but we do have an automated process. So any type of familiarity with operating through a DCS, like a automated control system, or data analysis and trend reviewing, process monitoring from various industries, but all translates from brewing. So that's some of the key things that we would look for.
Awesome. Yeah, that strikes me. We had a hospitality advisory 2 years ago, and that was the top request, was somebody to work on all of the machines. All of the massive baking equipment needs somebody to help, because if the oven's down, business is down. So that strikes that same chord for me. David, I would love to pass it to you if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, it was mentioned, the internship. I mean, that's how I got started. But beyond that, actually going to UC Davis, it is a small industry. So going to UC Davis, when I came back to the wine industry, a lot of the folks that I went to Davis with were already working at wineries, and so that network, that built-in network is really valuable. So any program or certification program or something that gets started, if you can include an internship or apprenticeship type program at the end of that, maybe it's just during the summer, maybe it's 1 quarter or half a semester or something. That's really valuable, not just to get that hands-on skill, but also to build your network. The sooner you do that, the better. So, and then as far as skills, ditto again what Jacqueline said. If you know how to, electricity scares me. I'm not good at small engines or electricity. I have to call someone every time. So, if you have those skills from a different industry and you can bring them over, it's always helpful.
Yeah, the cross training and the cross tabulations is always so valuable for so many different people. I would love to hear from Raef with the local brewery, what you guys are looking for.
Yeah, I mean, again, only having 24 employees, people wear many different hats. And so having somebody that, maybe has some mechanical skills is always helpful. I mean, if some piece of equipment, and others have said this already, but if something goes down, have somebody that can, get in there and help figure it out, or at least, get on a line and call somebody and walk through how to fix the keg washer or the glycol chiller or whatever. We've run into that, and so that's a skill that we've looked for in the past. And so again, an entry level person that maybe has more of a mechanical skill could be something that's pretty helpful. But again, I think we're home growing as many as we can, and so whatever other skills that they can bring that adds to that portfolio of what we do, whether it's front of house or back of house, is always something that we can take advantage of. So, if somebody comes in and says they want to be a brewer, but they've got a whole bunch of background in sales, we're not opposed to that if they're going to be able to help out a little bit on the off brew days. So, looking at utility players often is the best thing we can do at our size.
That makes total sense, especially with the smaller, more intimate. And I love the continuation across all of the different industry partners on making sure that there's like that externship, making sure that we get students out in the field really interacting with the different employers. Seems like it's going to be so important. And then just for the sake of time for my panelists, I'll let them know we're going to skip to question 5, but what would be your perspective about community colleges offering a general fermentation certificate? What elements should be included in the curriculum to best prepare students? Would that be continuing education for your current employees? Would that be something that is like brand new for incoming? What would that look like for you? And I can pass it to David.
Yeah, I actually wanted to, I'll get to that, but Aaron asked about how often do you upskill employees. I think that's really important. It's much easier to do that than hire someone and wonder if they're actually going to be the person that you need them to be. And I did do that with someone on my farm. Sent him through the beginning farmer program at Center for Land-Based Learning to really upskill him to become a manager, to be that management level. And now he's running our maintenance shop. So he's excelled. He learned how to use a laptop and all the Microsoft Office suite. And I mean, that has been huge for him. And he was concerned about his ability to speak English and fluently, and that just helped him have the confidence. So he's a very competent and confident manager now. So upskilling is very important. And if there are programs, back to this question, a fermentation certificate, I think would be valuable If I had that employee who was showing interest, I liked and was a really good employee by far. I mean, I would love to send them to a fermentation certificate program instead of having them go through a 4-year university program at UC Davis at a much higher cost. The difference is if you're already in the industry, you've already got your foot in the door. You don't necessarily, if you're on your own path. I mean, everyone's got a different path, and that a certificate program or trade program could be just what that person needs. And once you're in the right spot, that can afford you the upward mobility to continue succeeding. So, and as far as what else it could use, evening classes are great. It's tough to have your star employee go for 3 out of 5 working days all day to go to a class. So
Yeah, the continuing and investing in your employees seems like such a big thing for you guys, and I really love to see that. I was also with the ag tech that you guys are implementing. I know that, and then for a background for everyone listening, he works directly with Trish Kelly, who is our Ag and Natural Resources Director with Valley Vision, doing a lot of work. So it's awesome to see all of that work rolled out with you. And then I can also then pass it to Raef for maybe a little bit of a different perspective from that smaller brewer.
Yeah, and I think and we upskill somebody at least once a year. So kind of following up on David's point, that's something that we would love to do, and I like the idea of the evening classes as well. So yeah, I think it would definitely be very helpful to have a fermentation science training that we could send people to. I do think that there's going to be probably some industry specific needs for each thing. I'm sure what I would need are going to be very different from what David, Justin, and Jacqueline would need. So I think there would have to be some consideration given there. One area that you may want to kind of have some cross with is maybe the hospitality side. One of the things that we love to see from people that are coming into brew is to actually understand what the tastes that they're looking for. So what are the profiles of the beers that they're looking for, and what are off flavors? I think that being able to identify when something is wrong is hugely beneficial, and I think that's can be hard to train. Some people are just kind of born with that, but being able to understand what those are and where those come from, you can train that a little bit, but having some curriculum on that would be hugely beneficial.
Wonderful. Awesome. Thank you so much, Raef. Justin, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, a lot, and I'll try and condense them here. I think a fermentation certificate or just continuing ongoing education options where students could select individual courses without necessarily even having to go through a certificate program. Any of those things would be great. I have in the past, we have paid for education for employees to better their knowledge. Raef kind of referred earlier to everyone wanting to be on the brew deck, but you still need the keg washer, and it's the same in the wine industry. I think if there was some real practical labs would be a part that would be really important, because once someone understands in the winemaking side why they have to do 3 pump overs a day and stand at a tank for an hour doing a repetitive, seemingly boring job, once they realize that that is, a huge component of the quality of the end product, it makes that job a lot more meaningful. And so having that included is important, all the way down back again to the science, just understanding the fermentation pathway. Real simple, but once it's known, it makes all the other things easy. Sensory analysis, Raef alluded to, also super important. And including the some sort of statistical analysis of sensory evaluation. That was the biggest course, biggest thing I took away from UC Davis. I don't have the best nose necessarily, but once I learned that when you put statistics into it, then you can really evaluate things. So some sort of statistical component would be great. And also the other ancillary parts, especially when you're in smaller businesses, knowing what it actually takes to sell the product, because wine and beer probably also, and I don't know much about mycelium-based products, although I love anything fungal. Knowing what it actually takes to sell and what and what sort of, that helps determine, like, is it worth putting in these inputs to make what we think is a better product when really it doesn't make a difference on the consumer end. So that is important too. And then really, just to reiterate, having just a continuing education option for people that are already employed, have already got their foot in the door, that they can just take a course and something specific to what their employer needs or what interests them.
Wow, thank you so much, Justin. That was really impressive. And yes, I agree with you. I was really interested when I started diving into fermentation as somebody who had an inch of knowledge going into this, just how wide it is and how many different employee pathways you can take, and how shedding some light on that could really help some students in this field. I would love to pass it to Jacqueline to hear about some of the different ones that you might have. I imagine it might be a little bit different than what we've heard.
Well, I was going to say, I thought Justin had, I might just repeat a lot of the things that he said. But I do really want to re-emphasize what's already been said multiple times. I think sensory training and analysis on the sensory results. I know what we do right now is, our company currently is fewer than 20 people. And so, just like everyone said, wearing a lot of hats, our sensory panels are typically in-house. Of course, sometimes you'll do like a third-party one, but we've done a lot of like internal sensory trainings and work to figure out how can we draw conclusions from the results of that. And I think having that extra bit of as being a part of a curriculum would go really a long way, for sure. And then on top of that, just having hands-on experience with fermenters and equipment and aseptic and sterile processing technique, because that's such a huge part of habit. You can't even begin to learn about process monitoring and analyzing your product quality and improving it if you have contaminations very frequently. So that's just such a foundational part of the process, like having making sure your whole process is aseptic and completely sterile. The other thing that I think is worth mentioning is exposure to different types of downstream processing. So different methods of filtration or separation or distillation, but just exposing that there are a lot of different types of downstream operations to actually get to your final product. It's not just the fermentation itself that's critical, and having exposure to that for someone before coming in, I think would be really beneficial. And just general scientific principles as well, especially coming from my perspective, where right now we're really focusing on the process development and scaling up. We challenge every single person that works here to contribute to coming up with ideas to continue improving our process, or speaking out when they think there's something that can be improved and finding ways to go about solving it. So just starting, I think, like having that scientific principles foundation and hypothesis and experimental design, and can really kickstart like the critical thinking that you want everybody to have to begin to troubleshoot and help better the process.
Thank you so much, you guys, for nailing all of these questions.
Could I add one quick thing? I just wanted to piggyback. I think we've all kind of agreed the sensory analysis is super. Just even knowing a couple smells, I can just think when you walk past a fermenter, you're smelling the whole time, and you can go, you catch something, there is something wrong with that tank. And and that's your first clue that something is wrong, and that's what will allow you and would make you invaluable to an employer. I'm not by the tanks as much as my guy doing the pump over. So if he can catch us off smell, we can stop a problem before it ever happens. So I can't even emphasize that enough, and I'll stop now.
No, it's okay. This is what we're all here for, the actual hard-hitting stuff that you guys really want. Go ahead, David.
Yeah, I want to also reiterate the training on off flavors is so important, and I do training with our wine tasting team for that exact purpose, because when they come in and they don't know what TCA smells like, they'll pour a whole bottle without understanding that. And that musty smell is like, I tell them, this is not the way the winemaker intended, which is me. So I'm like, no, you can't pour this. And then on the beer side, having been in brewing, well, and the same thing, walking through tanks or smelling barrels or something, you know there's a problem, you have to remove that. And but then how many times do you go to a bar and someone's pouring you a pint of something and the line's completely dirty? Like, it's like, how does that bar staff not been trained to know what diacetyl and beer smells like, and every tap has the same smell to it? That's a failure in the hospitality training, the front of house training. So that is important.
Yeah, the sensory training sounds like it would be a massive effort. I worked at a coffee shop in college, which is a little bit of fermentation touching in it. And I just remember trying all of the different espressos, making sure I understood the difference. And I can't imagine then expanding that out to beer or wine or fermented meat products. So amazing. And I know we had a lot of questions out in the chat. I know I saw one from Erin. I'm sure I missed a couple. So if Caitlin, you want to help us out. But Erin, did you want to ask your question? I would love to let you have the mic.
Sure. And can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, I have a new kind of office setup, so I'm not sure why it looks like I'm across the room. But yeah, I was just curious after Raef, you commented on upskilling your employees, and it was kind of echoing amongst everybody else in the panel, how often you are upskilling and kind of providing additional training to employees, and specifically, how you're doing that. Raef, you said there wasn't anything local. So are you providing kind of online training? And I know that you said kind of once a year as well. So not trying to make anybody repeat themselves, because I know you guys kind of touched on it, but.
Yeah, you typically send somebody through once a year. We kind of leave it up to them. We do have some online resources that we've kind of prepaid for that are available. Oftentimes people do want a little bit more hands-on, so we have sent them to UC Davis and other places as well. I think we just didn't know that all of these sources were available. I'll be completely honest. So it's good to know that they're out there. So we had now I don't know if you all work with the Sacramento Brewers Guild or the California Craft Brewers Association, but letting them know that these are out there could be helpful too.
Awesome, thank you.
And I see another question from Alexander Hess. Alexander, if you wanted to speak to that, or we can also read it out. I can go ahead and read that out there. Alexander has students in the agriculture industry sector that are interested in food manufacturing and equipment fabrication that supports fermentation, brewing, viticulture. How could someone like him connect passionate and knowledgeable or skilled high school students to mentors in this field? Do you have any recommendations on that? Sort of circles back to that I think we touched on earlier, if you're someone looking to break into this field, where does that start? Or if you're a high school student interested, any pathways or connection to mentors that y'all would recommend? And
Yeah, I think it's kind of the same, look for the opportunities for internships. If you're able to, if you're not into sports or something, I mean, it's tough in high school. If you're a really active high school student, I mean, that's great because that helps you get into college. But if you're not really active in high school and you don't plan on going to college and you have more time after school, that's when you can go get those hours in an internship type setting. And then honestly, you have a leg up on the guy that went to college when they get out of school. As long as you're motivated, like I said before, you're motivated and want to pursue and can handle the challenge.
Thank you.
I will add, I think it's a little tough in our industry, and I don't know, maybe this is just, protection, but when you're serving an alcoholic beverage, hiring somebody under the age of 21 to do anything is always a little tricky. They can work on the packaging line, they could even be on the brewing side, but getting back to that other point is you really want your people to understand what the flavor and and the profiles of the product that they're creating are supposed to be. And so having somebody under the age of 21 or a high school student would be pretty difficult. I think on the equipment side, there actually are some brew house manufacturers locally that could be a good place to start with getting some of the high school students that are going to be more on that equipment side in touch with. I can provide some names offline. I'm drawing a blank right now, but that might be a good place to start.
Absolutely. That sounds wonderful. And I'll note too, I love seeing all this discussion in the chat. Part of the reason we host these events is to bring people together to make connections just like this. Jessica appreciated your note there. David?
Yeah, one thing I just wanted to mention is that on the farm side, and maybe even in other fermentation businesses, there's a huge Hispanic Latino population that English is not the first language, and they're willing to learn. And so if you had a class that had a Spanish speaking component, that's helpful, I think, for a lot of people. Maybe not so much, well, for any class, but I'm just thinking for upskilling my farm labor, that is something that's valuable. It's valuable for them to learn English as well, and that's one way I always give them the opportunity to take classes, and we pay for it to learn English better. But if they want to get a real grasp of something in their native tongue, that's helpful.
Alrighty. And I saw some chatter around SurfSafe completions, although I think that was answered. We have 2 minutes for one last question for a brave audience member. If anyone else has one final question before we close out today. Going once. Going twice. Oh, Erin, go ahead.
Sorry, this isn't exactly a question, but I just wanted to let everybody know that Center for Land-Based Learning does kind of training and upskilling for Hispanic agricultural workers. So it's for management, it's for different IT programs, and they just had their first graduating class a few months ago. So I kind of linked it in. Yes, David? Awesome. I put the link in there if anybody's interested or if you haven't heard of it. But yeah, thank you.
Amazing. And that's great to hear because we actually work with them on that project, Erin. So appreciate the shout outs for that. I want to say a huge thank you to our employer panelists. Thank you all for taking the time out of your incredibly busy days to join us here and for answering these questions. Very much appreciate your time and your insight. And I will next lean on my colleagues to pop up our screen and close us out here just shortly. Before we do, there was one question in the chat around Handshake, and I wanted to highlight this for folks. It's an opportunity platform for both students and employers to post jobs and internships, engage directly with students, attend career fairs, and sort of build up that employer brand. So if you're an employer looking to make that connection with students, get folks into some of those jobs, either during school or right out of school, highly recommend that. And we can follow up in our post-meeting materials with some additional information on Handshake. And then I will pop us into our very last slide here, wanting to say thank you to you all for joining this event. And again, want to thank our planning team members, particular Dr. Coppola and Erin for helping us put this together. We wouldn't be here without some of their initial thought leader process and bringing it all together. So very much appreciate that. Great to hear from you all today. And one final thing I will note is you'll see this beautiful QR code on the screen here. And I think my colleague just dropped a link in the chat. That is our post-event survey, which I'm sure you all attend many events. I'm sure there are many surveys. But I will say we really value folks' response to this to learn what you thought of this event, what you're looking for in future events. If there's any idea sharing or collaboration you'd like to do, that is the place to do it. Our team reads each and every response that we get from these survey results. So I will gently coerce you all to scan that QR code or click on that link. But without further ado, as I promised, we'll get you out of here right on time at 3 p.m. Thank you all so much again for joining us, and we will see you at a future advisory event. Thanks all. Have a good rest of your week. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
All right, everyone. Thank you.